Alright, so let's get started. This is a review of the Canon 70-300mm telephoto lens for Canon EF mount cameras. Now to start things off, I just want to say that I did buy this on Facebook Marketplace. I bought it for about half the price and the person said they barely used it. So I would say that it's a very good deal. This lens is pretty much in perfect condition with minimal wear. I see there's minimal fading on the zoom ring just from the sun. They probably left it in a window or something, but that does not affect anything. This lens is great for getting really close-up shots to a subject for wildlife. I use this pretty much only for wildlife photography. I haven't really used it for much else. I've only had it for a few months, but it is perfect for wildlife. If you want to do street photography, get some really compressed shots with this. Things that will be in the background will appear much closer than they were if you used a just normal like 24mm lens. Like I said before, this lens is for Canon EF mount cameras, and if you watched my previous video, you know that I use the Canon M50 to record my videos. So I use this little guy right here. This is the Viltrox EF to EF-M mount adapter. So I can attach any lens that is for EF cameras, just like this telephoto lens. I will take off the bottom and then line up the red lines you can see here. So now I can attach this straight to my Canon M50 without any problems. But yes, this lens was originally made for Canon EF cameras, even though it works perfectly just fine with my Canon M50. Now as far as the image quality goes with this lens, it is amazing. I love this lens. It is really sharp for a telephoto lens. I've had several lenses and this is by far one of the best lenses I've had. With some other lenses that I've had in the past, they have been really sharp, like the 30mm Sigma lens, but it also has a little cost. It has quite a bit of chromatic aberration. So sometimes you get one really good feature on the lens, but then you sacrifice another. But this lens excels in both of those areas, so I'm not concerned about any type of image quality with this lens. This is the Mark II version of the lens. This is the updated version, even though it is a few years old. I think this lens is still wonderful and I don't really see any problem with it. But the image quality on this lens is amazing. This lens, like I said, is very sharp. Even at 300mm, all the way zoomed in, you'll get very sharp images. Now, 300mm on this telephoto lens on a Canon crop sensor camera is equivalent to 480mm on a full frame camera, because you multiply 300mm by 1.6 for Canon cameras. And if you're using Nikon cameras, it is 1.5. So 1.5 times 300 is 450. So that gives you extra reach if you're using a crop sensor camera, which I feel like a lot of people out there are using, especially for wildlife photography, just to get the extra reach. But if you are using a full frame camera, this lens is still wonderful. 300mm will get you really close to the subject that you were photographing, so there are no worries there. This lens is really incredible when it comes to chromatic aberration. In my previous video, I mentioned how the Sigma 30mm f1.4 lens is incredibly sharp, but it is also quite bad when it comes to chromatic aberration. Even just taking a normal picture without the sun in the background, you will see there is chromatic aberration. It's really incredible the detail that you can get out of this lens. I am really impressed. And as far as the features that are on this lens, I will explain everything here. So you can see, first of all, there is the stabilizer, just on or off switch. There aren't any mode switches on this lens, so you can't change, like for autofocus, you can't change how close you are or anything. It's just on or off. But speaking of autofocus, here's the autofocus or manual focus, you can see here. And one really nice feature about this lens is this screen on the lens. It's not really a screen, but it's just a display. It displays some information that you can change on this lens. And this lens has a maximum aperture of f4. So at the widest, it will be at f4, and then at the smallest, it will be at f5.6 when you're zoomed all the way in at 300mm. This lens does use Canon's Nano USM autofocus. On the side of the lens here, you can see it says 70-300mm. Image stabilizer, Nano USM. And the Nano USM is a type of autofocus that Canon uses. I have found that this autofocus works incredibly fast. It is perfect, and when you're taking a picture of a bird in flight, it will typically stay tracked onto the bird and won't, find the background and autofocus onto that. So this lens is perfect when it comes to autofocus. Canon uses STM autofocus and USM autofocus, and the USM autofocus is a lot faster, I have found. It works really nicely, and I love using this lens with the USM autofocus in it. And as you see here on the side, the lens has a lock, so when it is at 70mm, you can lock the lens, and the lens won't creep out if you accidentally turn it upside down, so that is a really nice feature to have. The lock only works at 70 millimeters, so you can't lock it at say 100 or 135 or 200 or 300. It only works at 70. As you see here, when we take off the lens cap, it has a metal mount around the back with electronic contact points. Something that's nice about this lens is, although it's not weather sealed, it does have glass right up to the edge of the back of the lens, so dust won't be getting directly into the lens and you'd have to clean it out and all that stuff. That's just a mess. You can just blow off the dust from the back without it having to get deep inside. And when you connect this lens to a camera, it has 3 different modes that you can use. The first mode is a stabilization mode, so whenever you are moving the lens around, it'll show you how much it is shaking, which is really nice in case you're trying to be really still. It'll let you know, which if you use the stabilizer while looking at the information on the display regarding the vibration, you can get some really steady shots without much shake or wobble. And the screen does show horizontal and vertical axis for the shake. And the second mode on this display is for focusing. It'll show you how far away your subject is, and it'll show you that in feet and in meters. So that's really cool that it has that. And for the third mode on this lens, it shows you the focal length of this lens. So if you attach it to a crop sensor camera, it will show you the focal length of the lens multiplied by 1.6, so you don't have to do the math in your head. You can just look at the screen and it'll show you in real time the focal length of the lens. So at 300 millimeters, it shows you 480 millimeters on this lens. That is really, really cool. And the focus ring is on the front of the lens. It is very smooth and I have had no trouble with that. And the front of the lens accepts 67 millimeter filters. And as far as the weight goes of this lens is pretty heavy as expected. It is a telephoto lens, so it is going to be quite heavy. So if you can, try to hold the lens while you take pictures of it and not just hold the camera without holding the lens, because it could damage the lens mount. But I don't think this lens is too heavy. I think it is just fine and probably around the same weight as most telephoto lenses. And as far as lens hoods go, this lens does not come with a lens hood, which is okay. I'm fine with that. However, if you are wanting to get a lens hood for this lens, I would not recommend getting Canon's lens hood. It is, I think, $40, which is ridiculous. Just go onto Amazon and pick up this lens hood that I found for about $15. It works perfectly. It does the job. What's really neat about this lens hood is when you connect this lens hood to the front of the lens, it actually locks in place, which is really cool and handy, so it doesn't come loose and fall out while you are shooting. When you attach this lens hood to the front of the lens, it makes the lens a lot longer, and especially when you extend the barrel of this lens all the way out to 300 millimeters, this lens is about a foot long. This lens hood is also reversible, so you can just flip it over and attach it to the lens. It also clicks in place in reverse, so that is nice. And as far as this lens goes in low light, I would probably not recommend using this lens in low light. It was not really made for that. I think it was made for taking pictures of fast moving subjects, so you can, zoom in really far and take a picture of a bird flying through the air, which you're not going to be taking pictures of at night. So this lens is not really meant for low light performance. It can take pictures of stars and nebula, for example the Orion Nebula, but it is not perfect when it comes to that because of the maximum aperture of f4, which is not the greatest, but for a telephoto lens that'll work just fine. Brand new, this lens is selling for about $600 to $700, so it is a little bit up there, but if you get it used like what I did, I got it for $400 and it works perfectly fine. I'm really happy with my purchase. When I pick this lens up in my hand, it feels really great. It is really smooth and the build quality is a solid 10 out of 10. It is made out of plastic, as you can hear that. Sounds slightly cheap, but I think it feels really nice, so it kind of doesn't really bother me. And like I said before, this lens is compatible with pretty much all Canon EF mount cameras, or you can use an adapter like what I use and use it on the M50 or other M cameras. But I think that just about wraps it up. I will show you some more pictures that I've taken with this lens. I'm really excited to use this lens more. I love this lens and I'm glad I bought it because this lens is serving me perfectly. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It means a lot to me. And if you subscribe to this channel, be sure to leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and I will reply to your comment. I will try to reply to as many comments as I can, and I appreciate everyone who does so. And until next time, see you later, and here are some more pictures that I've taken. Peace.